Welcome back to the show, everyone. Craig and Jonah. I think Jonah has a story to get us
I
started.
got a couple of this. So on Sunday after Mass, we were coming home from church, and one of the kids had a prayer card, and it was the prayer for vocations, but they thought it was the prayer for vacations.
Oh, a little
But
different.
yeah, that led to a different conversation in the car. But I thought it was pretty funny. And but if there's a prayer for vacations out there, it's kind of cold here. So
Yeah, we'll take just about any place but here.
And then speaking of the cold, I decided to set up an ice bath in the basement of our house. A cold plunge.
Christopher West finally get to you. You're going to crucify that old flesh,
Well, no, I
visited
mean,
by his spirit in the middle of the night.
no. So the reason that I did it is that Joe Rogan, he does it, and he talks about how the primary reason why he does it is the hardest thing you do is the hardest thing you do in life. And so it's like a strategy for overcoming mental obstacles. Like it just, the more difficult things you do, the easier it is to do difficult things. And I totally agree with that.
Hmm.
And it is a challenge. I when I got my feet in the water, it's like knee deep water or whatever. I basically took a cow tank, a stock tank, and filled it up with water. In our basement's like in the high 40s right now. So it's
That's
cold
cold.
water.
Yeah.
But I was standing there, and you have to make yourself sit down. And so I did it for 3 minutes, and it does take your breath right away. So like if you like Christopher West, in his defense, if you were having urges
Oh,
and you went and sat down in an ice bath, I guarantee it would work. Like if you want to see how fast morning wood can shrivel right up, you just sit down in 40 some degree water. Like that's no doubt. So when I sat down in it the first time, it just sucks the air. Like you just take a deep breath. I can see how people die. There's some risks associated with it as far as having a heart attack or a stroke. And like you
warning! Don't.
Well, yeah, don't take
Don't
medical
hold us
advice
for-
from us.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Don't hold us responsible.
about then it's cold, but it's not that bad. After you get over the initial shock. But then 20 minutes later, you feel really good. Like it does feel really good. But the other reason that I started doing it, that Joe Rogan talked about, is that it boosts testosterone. And so I've been trying to get in better shape.
Do you really need more of that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. So I've been trying to get in better shape. So this is where it gets risky as a Catholic. Like how much testosterone do you want? Do you really want to be in good shape? I don't know. But I feel like I do, because so it's been shown that if you do an ice plunge or whatever, a cold bath, and then work out, it boosts testosterone by a lot. Like it's significant. And so I don't know, I'm only on day 2, but I did it again today.
So if you want like the icy hot experience, do you have your wife get out of the shower on the other side of the room and you get both sides of it working on you?
I haven't done that.
Okay.
I
Well,
do go and stand up by the wood stove though, and
Okay.
and heat up after that. So
Right. Well,
I don't know.
I'm glad you're here, still here to tell us about the story.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that if you're going to use an ice bath to ward off sins of the flesh, it might work initially, but I think you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. To boost testosterone at the end.
Yeah.
So
It's funny. What time of day do you do this? In the morning?
yeah, 4:45 a.m.
You are. Yeah, we are getting.
I get right out of bed and just walk down there and do it.
So,
And it does take mental willpower to do it. Like like both mornings, I've had to fight myself to sit down in the bath.
does Dolores like force you into it or something?
No,
like
she's
that?
still sleeping. She did want to see it the first time, but
She had seen enough, and
no, she's still sleeping.
see, my problem, and I was going to ask you about this the other day, and I'm glad you brought it up. So, my problem is I need the ice bath from about 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. That's the witching hour for me.
Well, just do it then.
And I won't.
I would bet you it would work. You might be awake though the whole night. Like,
That's my fear.
It wakes you up like a cup of coffee. Like you are instantly awake, like bam,
Yeah.
right now.
So, do you have a period, a time of day when the temptations of the flesh are strongest?
Sure, like when you're laying in bed.
So, why do you think that is? Do you think I have some theories about that? And I'm going to ask you because I know you young teenagers are, us old people. We have this. when we do the marriage thing, it's always at night. So is my body just trained to be looking for something?
Oh, we can be intimate all times of the day in our, like,
Okay.
don't worry
And
about it.
it's but still for you, like the
That is most
temptation hour is at night when you go to bed.
that is correct.
Okay. I'd be curious what other guys.
Like you can kind of feel it during the day, but I think you can just stay busy.
Yeah, you're
Whereas,
staying busy, but it's just kind of like you lay down to bed and there's like, okay, now what do I do with myself?
yep,
And the thing just
yep,
primes up and
yep.
I
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
okay. Well, other people need to chime in and let us know because to me,
I would say either laying in bed or in the shower. And then when it rains, it's a whole complicated situation.
yeah, that's awkward.
I'm just kidding.
Great clouds on the horizon. Let's get Jonah back home.
I was cleaning it and it went off.
That's right. All right. So a little update on the couple episodes ago. I think it actually is going to be releasing today when we're recording this. I think it's like 180. Andy, link to that below. God, that's pretty cool to be able to say that. Andy, link to I think it's 180, the Instagram one. So I got into a little bit of a skirmish with folks over and I call them the polite Catholic media.
That's nice.
We're not in the I don't consider ourselves in the polite Catholic media. I sort of described ourselves as the island of misfit toys the other
I
day.
saw that.
Someone on Twitter.
That's a good analogy. And there's all kinds of people in our group.
Yeah.
All walks of life
Yeah,
there.
we're gathering a real ragtag group of people.
Just like the rebels in Star Wars.
Yeah. Going up against the Death Star.
I'm not sure that's the right analogy, but
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. Anyway.
If you're on social media, Twitter, go find us on Twitter. You can actually engage with Jonah there.
Yep, I just signed up.
Yep. So go find us on Twitter. We've been just in the last couple of weeks, a lot of interesting people have come into our lives through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually how I found Father Longenecker. Back sort of in an indirect way, I was asking for a I don't know if I was asking for a married priest and someone put me in touch with him but it was through Twitter. But now we're gaining steam on Twitter and all the people that share our feelings but are too smart to say anything about it message me privately now. Which is cool.
That is great.
And some of them are interested in possibly coming on the show and doing some discussions with us on some things. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, so but every so often I come into encounter the polite Catholic social media out there, and that happened on Instagram the other day.
As far as polite versus like ultra traditional, that is like thorny, maybe.
Yeah, I don't put the trads in this thing because I think they're just I don't think they can relate to any of this. But the TOB people
they'll burn you at the stake.
Hmm?
Where they'll burn you at the stake for
the trads
for being a heretic, or like the so you say polite versus.
I would say the polite people are the Christopher West and those that are kind of the not trying to bring back the marital debt, but are trying to infuse good old Carol Wojtyla into our marriages. I got a little tab here I'm going to talk about here in a second. And in this particular podcast, and I'm not going to name them. Maybe I'll use his first name, only because I don't want people. I don't want them to be associated with us if they don't want to be.
Yeah, sure, that's fair enough.
But so anyway, they had posted about a week ago about there was a discussion on another Catholic podcast where a group of guys were talking about how often guys think about sex, and the example came up of this poor guy who was gone for 2 weeks doing job interviews, came home and rookie mistake came in and basically said, "Oh, honey, all I can think about is having sex with you tonight," or something like that, which I totally get and relate to. But she apparently didn't like it, and these people did not like that.
And that is the difference between being married and before you're married and being married, right there in a lot of cases for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I
Well, and this couple's married. It's a husband and wife does the show. And so I commented on their post, and I try not to, in part because when we have interacted with the polite Catholic community in the past, it has generally not gone very well. And I've gotten they've had to throw up disclaimers and don't listen to this man. He's teaching you false stuff. Simply for asking if it's okay to request a quickie to avoid sin. Apparently, you can't ask that. Carol Wojtyla won't let me do that.
Not to play the trad card there, but I'm pretty sure that's in the Bible.
I don't think we use
and
that
I
anymore.
do not endorse the marital debt, but
no,
if you're going to play strictly by the letter of the law.
Yeah, so they've essentially replaced the marital debt with this standard that you must only approach your wife if it's with the correct, pure intentions. And if it's carnal based, if it's too much about me satisfying my carnal needs, that somehow is treating your wife like an object or vice versa.
And then you whip yourself 75 times and roll in the thorn bush.
Yeah.
To overcome it.
That is the I posted on Twitter within the last week, kind of like posing like, okay, so you got the guy that's in a marriage, but intimacy isn't as frequent as he would like, and he's struggling with solo stuff, and he's got two options. Which one do people think are more virtuous? One being do a hardcore novena, fast, maybe some bodily mortification to control expectations, I guess, to figure out how to manage your body on that infrequent schedule. Or alternative two is to improve your marriage, increase frequency, and all but eliminate the need for it.
And that was a great question.
I thought that was fair, but apparently you're not allowed to ask that. Of course, you got to mortify yourself. And if you are using your wife, if you're doing what you're supposed to do as married people to fix your
and
problem,
enjoying it, and everybody's happy.
Yeah. That's sort of more of the trad people, but
and I can see that as far as like being where people are using marital debt, and I think that's a messed up situation. Then you should just not do that. But if you can come together as husband and wife in where both people are desiring it, what's the issue?
Yeah, I don't know. People are afraid of being too happy, I guess.
I don't want to have too much pleasure. That's where I don't know that kind of line of thinking could make you insane. Like it could make you very scrupulous. Like, why am I desiring my wife right now? Like, what does that look like where you want unity with your wife without any level of desire?
I
can't relate to that.
Yeah. I mean, so let's do this. I'm going to play a short clip, and they don't name us or anything, but they're clearly referencing us. And then I want to address that issue. So let's play just a little bit here.
Last episode we had about men just wanting sex all the time. We gotten nice pushback on Instagram.
Nice pushback.
Good.
And it's definitely me because there's no one else.
Oh, they're pushback.
One account in particular, and it was interesting to get their perspective, and then also go listen to like their content that they put out.
I want to know what he listened to. If he would have asked, I would have given him some suggestions.
OnlyFans material or OnlyFans material, not OnlyFans.
Yeah, it's not all of the same quality, but some's better. Some of our work's better than others.
And I do think it's important that we stay grounded in good theology, because I thought a lot of their perspective was like, well, men do desire it all the time, and Renzo's just a unicorn.
He used his name, so all right. So in part, Renzo, I'm going to send this clip to you, and us talk. This is kind of our response to you, Renzo. So I'm going to give.
is basically what they were saying. Like Renzo,
Beautiful unicorn.
yes. Well, that's what. So the term unicorn.
I think I did call him a unicorn. I said my experience is that most guys relate more to the guy that's being chewed out for going 2 weeks and all thinking too much about sex. I said Renzo seems to have harnessed some Zen-like unicorn abilities. So
Yeah, I don't know.
basketball, and like when there's like a player who's just like he's got all the attributes of a good basketball player, like he's super tall, he can shoot threes, like they're like, oh, that's a unicorn. Like that's not it's okay. So like when in the draft they're trying to find the unicorn. Sorry, that's where I got the phrase. So they think that I just happen to have like superhuman abilities to not desire it all the time. So like they were pushing back on that, and
Yeah.
I would like to do an episode at some point breaking down a little bit more of Aquinas with Theology of the Body and the Catechism, and showing that like what's possible for like what the church teaches is possible for freedom in our sexual realm.
Yeah.
Because I just think it's important, because I don't think that they think that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And
Beg to differ. And yeah, and
This is where it get like I would behave differently if my wife was sitting right next to me too.
yeah, you guys can't see the video, but she's sitting over his shoulder, and they're a sweet couple. Like I have nothing of the polite Catholic community. Excuse me, I really like these people.
Mhm.
Okay, so I literally have no bones to pick, which is part of the reason why I was reluctant to tangle in this.
Mhm.
So I appreciate the fact that they acknowledged it, and he and I exchanged some messages. I appreciate the fact that he went over and looked at some of our content. Not sure what he looked at.
And I don't think we're saying that it's impossible to live like that. I'm just saying that I think eventually you age out of it. Or something like that.
Well, it is funny because so I'm in my mid 40s, and just yesterday I was messaging with a gentleman on Twitter who reached out to me, and we were talking a little bit about this issue, and I says, for me, I get sort of day one bliss, and then I said you get to day 3 and 5, and I said for me, if you get to a week, it gets pretty difficult.
Mhm.
And he was like, yeah, I'm burning up by day 3. And I probably was like that. Now he's younger. He's probably 10 years younger than I am.
Well, and there's, it's interesting. They say that testosterone rates have dropped dramatically since the 1950s, and what role that plays in our society as well, and
And
controlling this sort of stuff.
he did make that comment too. This gentleman I was messaging said like people forget that not everyone has the same desire rates.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
And guys like you and I, like we work out and we're active, and I mean that's a big difference. I'm not saying anything about the person in the other podcast, but like if you stay fit and healthy.
Well, he is young and fit, and I know they do like jujitsu and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
again, I think he's a unicorn.
Well, I'm not saying anything about him. I'm just saying.
I mean, I'm impressed if the way he describes it is true,
Mhm.
which I have no reason to doubt that it is. But I do want to. So I wanted to send this video or this clip to Renzo and his wife, just to kind of not push back, but just to clarify kind of where I'm coming from.
Sure.
Because it's been a little while since we talked about PMAS.
Mhm.
We have a lot of new listeners, so I think this would be. Do you want to take a stab at articulating PMAS for us? Post-marital act syndrome?
You actually came up with the term and the criteria and the major,
Okay.
guideposts for that.
All right. So PMAS TM, post-marital act syndrome, is weirdly enough is something I had thought about for a long time, but it kind of put us on the map a little bit, because I shared that with another lady I know who has a non-Catholic intimacy podcast, and I kind of recorded what it's like to go from, let's say, intimacy to like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 7. But for me, and so before I do that, let's talk about Carol Wojtyla, because they just mentioned they want to bring him in. So if you go to Love and Responsibility, and I don't know if the page number is the same all the time, but I do want to highlight this because I think Carol Wojtyla got this wrong, and anyone that relies upon this is not, they're not dealing with good information. But on 283, he says, and he's talking about the woman, the wife, for normally her sexual urge makes itself felt most insistently at the moment of ovulation and during the fertile period. Yeah.
Sure, fair.
Parentheses, the intensification of the urge is one of the symptoms of the so-called ovulatory syndrome. I don't know what that is, close parentheses. And this is just the time at which she must refuse intercourse. Periodic, so okay, so that he's talking about the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember texting you when I read this. Jonah, you're not gonna believe this.
I do remember you texting me about it.
So he goes on. Periodic continence presents the man with no such difficulty, since his sexual drive is not subject to such fluctuations as that of the woman. Male continence must therefore adapt itself to the indications which the woman's organism provides. All right, dude. It is not consistent.
I think it is for a celibate man because over time their sperm producing cells shut down. And so I think if you can overcome that, then it's a flat line.
I
more or
suspect
less.
I suspect the ups and downs are less severe from each
That's a
other.
great point.
I think your baseline is more consistent. It is not that way for most men. Maybe Renzo's different, but
For me and Craig, it is different. And we are on a very similar schedule.
And this has been validated by other men that have talked to us. So if people get nothing else from us, get this, okay? And I'm specifically addressing this to Renzo and his wife and anyone that might listen to it. For the man, how I think about sex on day one, and when I say day one, let's say day one after intimacy, so within the 24 hours.
Dolores and I use hours.
Okay.
Anyways.
Hours,
we get confused on the days sometimes.
Yeah, well, see, for us, it's always at the end of the day anyway, and then I go right to sleep.
Oh, I suppose.
There's no remaining hours.
Because like if it's early in the day for us, then I consider that like
no, it's kind of like we have our thing and I go to bed.
I understand that
the next day.
Okay.
So the next day is the bliss period. Like it's like all that physical impulses and stuff has pretty much been neutralized. You have this very, very positive emotional connection to your wife.
Yes, the positive emotional connection that lasts for a few days.
Yeah, so that's what the way I look at it. When
that covers up all flaws and issues, it's just all smoothed over.
Yep. I look at my wife in a different way on the day one that I say most closely resembles to how I looked at her on our wedding day.
I would agree with that.
Not that I wasn't thinking about the wedding night in the back of my mind, but you're there, it's just a beautiful time. And I think that's what JP2 is asking us to achieve or to search for. And that is the most positive, wonderful time to be married. And this is where I think a lot of people get it wrong. And I hear not to pick on old Christopher West, but he always focuses on, we just want the pleasure. We're just searching for the pleasure. And yes, it's pleasurable. But I think for a lot of guys, we're searching for that day one experience of how that feels to interact and love your wife.
Just that connection.
Right. Where I'm not thinking about making a move. I'm not thinking about intimacy that night. Right. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about her as a person, the person that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that carryover effect. And so for day one, I'm not being torn by the desires of the flesh. I'm really living off the fruits of the last time.
Mm-hmm. And that lasts for, I would say, up to 3 days, maybe. Something like that.
I'd say 1 to 3 days.
After 3 days for sure.
Yeah. And so you get to about day 3 and you've kind of lost that. And now
just the bliss period is changing.
Yep. And then you get to start to day 4, day 5, day 6, 7, and this depends maybe a little bit on the guy and his age, but those desires start to turn up again. Those carnal, physical desires,
and the connection with your wife
wears off.
And it's like then once you get to day 14, if you can make it that far, it's more like roommate status.
Yeah, roommates, and your loins are burning, right?
Yeah.
Your
That's
loins.
fair.
So to me, it's essential that we understand that, and that when we talk about men's sexual desire, we ask, okay, well, where in that process are we talking about? If you're asking me how I feel on day 1 or day 2, that is a very different answer than how I'm feeling at day 10 or day 14.
Mm-hmm.
And this poor guy that was sort of being maligned, and I kind of came to his defense. The example given is he had been gone for 14 days, so obviously he's not being intimate with his wife. I don't know what was all going on in the hotel room, but let's just say he
Made it
stayed
through
the
there.
course. 14 days, you are just overwhelmed by
Mhm.
physical desire,
And you miss your wife.
and you miss your wife, and you desire to sort of be free from that, but also to
Renew that connection.
re-experience that connection with
Mhm.
her. And
Like, is that so bad?
is that bad? Like, I the message I got is that's disordered.
And the issue is that in the Bible it says your body, like it talks about that. Like I'm sorry, I'm a true Catholic where I don't know the word by heart, but
Somewhere in there.
it talks about how your body isn't exactly totally yours in that way. So I don't know.
Well, it's funny because I was looking, this whole thing, so, where in Genesis, I think it talks about where a man shall leave his mother and father and marry his wife, and then Jesus talks about it somewhere in the Gospels, and and depending on the translation, said a man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, cling to his wife,
Mm-hmm.
not just be joined, but like that, cleave to her, cling to her.
Mm-hmm.
Seems significant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I don't think it's disorder necessarily to have that strong physical longing for your wife, as long as that's not the only thing that's driving you.
Yeah.
And to just say, well, that's disordered, I feel is really ignoring part of the theology of our bodies. I don't think there's anything abnormal, unusual, or really sinful for the man who's been, let's say, 2 weeks without intimacy with his wife to have very strong desires for her, even if a large component of that is physically driven.
And that doesn't mean that she should feel, pressure to be intimate either.
Right.
But she could at least be
Validate his
understanding or
experience. Just
whatever.
validate his experience. So the message I want to say is this: the man who is in that situation is feeling that. I don't think there's anything abnormal or unusual about that. You still got to be tactful, still got to be respectful to your wife, but
So,
man, oh man,
should he come home and, she'd say, so how was your trip?
yeah,
Oh, it was great. I didn't think about you at all. I mean,
never even crossed my mind.
nope.
What do you want? Like,
what do you want? Like, do you want your husband to miss you?
Yeah.
Do you want that?
Right. And
I would love it if my wife would come home and say, I thought about having sex with you the entire time.
Right. Yeah. Just lie to me if you have to.
But, would that make you,
Well, in sort of in fairness here, what's going on, I think they kind of talked about this on their episode, was that, for the wife, if she's like any of us, she's at home with all the kids, and it's stressful, and this is not on her mind at all. Like, she's just trying to get by until he gets home.
Yep.
And I totally get that. Like,
yeah.
This is not to invalidate her experience
not at all. And she shouldn't feel obligated towards any sorts of intimacy either.
Right. But I just think we need to not be so quick to like judge him and say he's disordered, if his experience while he's gone is not the same as hers, that he must just like have this zen like, put that out of his mind. He's just focused on the task at hand. He's out interviewing for jobs. I just don't think that's a realistic expectation for most men. And
it might be unnatural.
It seems
to not desire your wife. I mean,
yeah.
I
flesh of my flesh, all that. Like, so that
like to treat sex and the desire as naughty or bad in that situation. I just don't get that.
Yeah. I think we have to maintain some level of control, obviously, but
well, yeah.
But to
tell your wife that you're desiring her is not is not losing control either.
No. Yeah, I mean that the problem for a lot of men who feel like they have to just pull these reins super tight and have this very zen-like control over these emotions that I think are just very natural. I don't think this is original sin. I think this is just the way we are. The guys that feel like they have to harness that, if they can't, I think they are very prone to slipping into some of these sinful habits and things that none of us want to be associated with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just mind-boggling to me how we not we, but sort of the polite Catholic community wants to talk about the theology of the body and not treating our bodies as bad, but as being reflective of God's design for us. And yet, when you get into these things, we don't like how they are. We don't want to deal with it. And we just describe that as being disordered and whatever. And I think a lot of guys feel sort of guilted about that. And I think a lot of wives, because that's different from their experience, don't relate to that, don't understand that their husband's going through that. And if they catch wind that that's how he feels, that they're concerned he's a sex crazed maniac.
So then, you know, like, just think if you went to confession, you said, you know, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been a couple of weeks since my last confession, and traveled for work, and I desired my wife the entire time. Then he'd be like,
And the priest like, and no,
that's it.
That's it. That's the sin. Mea culpa.
I mean, I just
Quit wasting my time, dude.
there's 30 other masturbators out there. I gotta hear that.
I got mass in 15 minutes. Get out of here.
It's true though. You know, like
that to me is where I diverge the most from the sort of the theology of the body crowd, because I'm with them on the misgivings I have about the traditional marital debt, you know, body is bad, do whatever you have to avoid sin thing on the one hand, and this other kind of approach, which I think was designed to avoid that, to replace that old way of thinking with a positive way of thinking. But what I think has happened unwittingly is it's placed such a high expectation of how men and women, but especially men, need to react to themselves and their wives, that I do think it's impossible. Like I mean, I think for most normal average men to expect him to not only avoid any of the sins of the flesh, so to speak, the acts and all that, but also to have this very pure, perfect, almost I don't know, mystical view of his wife,
where he can't desire her, but he wants unity.
and if he senses too much physical desire for her, he's supposed to deny himself. I wonder
when the physical desire starts. Is that with an erection?
Yeah.
Or like, I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
Like, I don't know when, like, you would say, nope, that's enough. Go sit in the timeout box, you know, or whatever.
Go join Jonah in the ice bath.
Yep.
Is there room for two? Probably not.
No,
Maybe
you know,
small guy.
And it'd be kind of weird doing it with another guy.
Yeah, I suppose. Take turns.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not. It's always so hard talking about this because they see, oh, you're just defending the uncontrolled, disordered man. We're not.
We recommend confession regularly.
Yeah, no one recommends confession probably more than us.
We recommend confession more than Christopher West, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because this guy was messaging on Twitter. We were talking about that, and we both said, you know, just go to confession all the time. Like if there's any fruit of this struggle that men have, it's like you spend a lot of time in confession.
When in doubt, go to confession.
Yeah, so that will continue to be our message. When in doubt, but I just it hurts me to see this, and I think I think for one reason or another, men especially do not push back on this, do not comment
Yeah. Well,
on those kinds of things. And so I think it creates and maybe they all feel that way. I mean, maybe the good Catholic world is full of Renzos.
maybe we're the weird ones.
Maybe we are, but I get enough private messages to know that that's not true.
Yeah, the messages where people talk about how they're scrupulous and despairing because of this.
Yep.
I don't know, there's real suffering that occurs because of this sort of stuff.
Well, I said this on again Twitter the other day. I said, the church's teachings on these finer points of human sexuality are indeed a source of great suffering for many, many souls. The only question is whether the suffering is happening on this side of eternity or the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe both, but there are a lot of people that are suffering immensely on this side of eternity, trying to live up to these standards that I think
are nearly impossible. I mean,
yeah, I know nothing's impossible with God. I'm not saying God can't do it, but if you go back to one of our last couple episodes, there is the law of diminishing return. Like, yeah, if I did nothing, if I gave up everything but work and I just didn't interact with my kids, had no hobbies, didn't do anything fun, I just spent myself in the ice bath, spent my time in the ice bath in Jonah, I could absolutely probably develop this Zen-like management. But is that really what we're supposed to do? Is it that important? Are the I don't know, infractions of the flesh so bad that we're supposed to devote that much energy to it? Maybe we are. If that's true, number one, let's do that. And number two, if you're not married, don't get married. Like,
that's
just
true.
avoid it. Go be a hermit.
And it does say that in the Bible too.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially.
Yeah. St. Paul says. So
just because it's nearly impossible to never desire your wife.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's a sin to desire your wife either, but I'm just saying if that's your standard, that's a difficult path.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's a balance. I think it's a balance of having a healthy desire for your wife, without losing complete control of it and just becoming whatever, I don't know, demanding it all the time or whatever. I don't know.
And I think that's the main reason that despairing over this stuff is so bad is that it kills your joy and it kills your ability to really evangelize in any way. Like you can't go around and say, man, I'm Catholic and I'm proud when you're worried about going to hell because you masturbated or whatever. You should be trusting in God's mercy. And that's really what the Catholic Church is all about, is trusting in God's mercy. But somehow the message got lost along the way. Like we have confession, we have the sacraments, we have all that stuff. But, the trads have made it very much like an elitist club in a lot of respects. And I think that's the bad part of the traditional side of Catholicism.
I remember just like a year ago before we started this, like, I mean, before I kind of really repaired up my marriage with my wife and we really put effort into improving our intimate lives, both quality and quantity. I had such a love-hate relationship with all of this that, I was so tortured internally just trying to get through the balance of the abstinence period. An abstinence period, in my mind, is anytime you're intimate less frequently than you would like, whether you're purposely spacing children or not. And so I was, and it was this weird feeling because when it would finally happen and you have all that release and you're in that bliss period, my head hadn't even hit the pillow and I was like, oh God, I got to go through all that again. Like it was a PTSD inducing thing because I associated what is so wonderful, one of the most wonderful parts of my marriage.
And it is a gift from God.
It is.
Without a doubt.
I could not unassociate that with the incredible suffering, moral guilt, all that. Just maintain the course, Craig. Like don't. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Now I have a total different like it.
Mhm.
It's not that it's not something I still have to work on, but I pay so little attention to this now because my marriage improved that much.
Better communication has led to more intimacy,
Yeah.
and it just changes your life. And that's the in my opinion, that's the best way to overcome solo activity or any of those
hmm hmm
sorts of temptations. And some people would say that you're just giving in to your temptations, but I find that really hard to believe because it's not disorder to the point, like you said, like why are you in the bliss period for 3 days afterwards where like
Yeah.
there's no risk of
Yeah.
falling into those sins?
Yeah. Like, why is it that if the devil is just using the flesh against us all the time, why does he give me a 3-day head start? I don't know.
I don't know.
So that's not to say that it's all biology and spirit doesn't matter, but I think
The biology of it is more of a component than what people would like to
Yep.
admit on the
Yep.
theology of the body side.
And more importantly, I think for most men, if you have a porn or masturbation addiction, and they're different problems, I think the solutions are different, but I think for a lot of guys, if you approach that problem purely as a spiritual issue and not recognizing the physiological realities of how it happens, you're probably going to struggle and never really overcome it because it's not in the same way that if I'm an alcoholic and I got a problem and I need to overcome, can you novena your way out of alcoholism? I suppose.
Possibly.
I'm not saying that like that's impossible, but I think for most men, it's a combination, or men or women, whoever's dealing with that problem, it's a combination of recognizing how our bodies, how our brains work, addressing our habits and behavior, in addition to mindset and prayer. Like I think it's a package
And that's where
deal.
2352 comes in, as
Mhm.
far as there being a conditioned habit
Yeah.
and lessening culpability. And so you shouldn't be scrupulous. Like it's not saying that you should, it's not a approval of any of that stuff, but scrupulosity has to go and just
Yeah.
trusting God's mercy.
Well, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we talk about and we'll continue to talk about. And so I'm really glad that we were able to have that exchange with them. And I hope they watch this episode or this section that we talked about them, and maybe they'll um address it on their show. Renzo, you have an open invitation. If you want to come on the Island of Misfit Toys with us, you're welcome to do so.
Totally.
Totally understand why you may not want to do that. You're not going to hurt our feelings, but I just think, just based on our experience and the messages we get from guys, I think this is such a common pain point for people, especially men, Catholic men, that I just think it gets ignored too easily. And
Mhm.
because it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about for us and for most people. And so we're trying to stop that.
Mhm.
So yeah, so sorry, JP2, I love you, but you were wrong. You were in error.
Yep. You were saying that just basically, if you weren't in an active sexual relationship, you wouldn't know that.
I don't fault you. I same thing. I don't fault Thomas Aquinas for being wrong. He's human too.
Yep.
And this is where, and I once thought this was wrong, but I do think that if you've never been in an intimate relationship with someone else, your experience is going to be limited, and the knowledge you have is going to be limited. And I just think so.
And you can't speculate on what it's like to be married until you're married.
Right.
Like
Right.
you can receive all kinds of marriage advice before you're married, but once you're in it, it's like so at times it's a lot different than what you thought it would be.
Yep, it certainly was for me. So anyway,
All
well,
right.
so we're gonna share that. We'll share this with them, and certainly invite people to comment. Please continue to send us messages. Pray for us.
Just pray for us.
For all kinds of reasons. Pray for us. pray for your spouse. These guys that talk to me, one of the things I always tell them, if you're not already doing this, pray for your spouse daily.
It's true.
That was one thing that helped me really overcome it, is when I got to the point where I was purposely praying for my wife and her happiness, even when I did not feel necessarily that way.
Mm-hmm.
That was a difference maker for me. So pray for your spouse, pray for them, desire their happiness, even if at times they don't seem to be desiring your happiness. Desire their happiness. Make that a purposeful part of your life every day. And then
It's good advice.
yeah.
And go to confession and trust in God's mercy, and everything's going to be okay.
Yep. And then subscribe and share our podcast.
There, right in that order.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that order of importance. So all right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Jonah, for those. And until next time, everyone.
You bet. Bye.
Have a good one.